All right, so we temporarily lost power and Matt's laptop, so we are back on. We did pause. We do have Gary here to witness that we didn't discuss any school business while we were gone, so especially with the public participation part coming up. But let me pick up where I left off. I just want to make a comment, and maybe it's because I paid more attention this year, but something that I've always pushed for from a board standpoint is that we are developing well-rounded individuals, and not just focusing on kids that are just going to college, but also focusing on folks that are ready for work out of high school and are going to be productive citizens. And as I look through this year, as my son's a senior, through the senior slideshow, it was a welcome to see that not only are there lots of kids that are planning to go to college, but there are also lots of kids that are planning to enter a trade. Welding, for example, is one that stuck out, or go to nursing school, medical assisting school. So I think that just speaks volumes, at least to the work that the administration has done, some direction that the board's provided. But we are developing kids that are well-rounded, are going to leave here with a great education. Some have participated in internships or co-ops before they're leaving the doors. And kind of paving the way for them to enter a successful field right out of school. So I just thought, as I looked through the senior slideshow and I saw the different paths of our students that they're going to have when they leave these walls, I was impressed to see that there was a breadth of different experiences and different plans for the kids of Clinton Massie. So I just wanted to commend not only Matt but also your entire staff on not focusing just on one career path. We are focusing on the individual needs of the students and trying to have their best outcome. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, and thank you for the class of 2020. It was pretty impressive to see when I went through that slideshow. So, all right.
One thing before we move on to public participation.
Yep.
Mr. Becker, I had a question about the strategic planning. I know there was a public committee that helped with that. Was there any more meetings you had scheduled that you feel like you need their input, or are you going to do a Zoom meeting, or you thought you were far enough along that we don't need any of that?
Yeah, we were through what I think was the main driving force of that committee, and that was to connect what the OFEs were, the opportunities for improvement. By having those, that's what we delivered and needed to deliver to Dr. Summers. So it would have been great to have a last meeting, because we were going to take those OFEs and talk about some hows and some whys, about suggestions of, okay, now that we've recognized what prioritizes our time, how do we use that time properly? I think at this point we're able to do that through our administrative staff, through our SLT. But yeah, the public side was awesome. They were very helpful. Tons of teachers involved, public members involved. But I think at this time we'll be able to close that up, and then hopefully integrate the community and those outside of the district in the actual actions now. You know what I mean? So also, I apologize, Mr. Lame, if I could add 1 second. If you'd like me to, can I turn on the public participation number?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, while waiting for that, I wanted to just note, there we go. We did also receive a grant for food delivery. It's starting with $2,500, and there is a potential for another $2,500. We're also committing or already turned in a application through a grant for greenhouse lights and a new track. So those are just a couple notes. The board was supportive in allowing me to use one of our employees here, Cindy Stinger, as a resource for grant writing, and she has been nonstop this whole time during our absence in the brick and mortar, and been working on food delivery money. The track thing is exciting. It's awesome. She got quotes pulled back from that, and then also looking at some greenhouse lights to help supplement some of that cost as well. Just wanted to note that. And the public participation number is now posted on our live stream.
Okay. So now we are to the public participation part of the meeting. Again, bear with us as we do this kind of as a mixed model with the board here in person, socially distanced, and then folks attending virtually. Again, just to reiterate and again summarize the public participation policy. So anyone wishing to speak before the board will be recognized by the board president. Each individual will state his or her name, address. Any individual that comes before for public participation has 5 minutes to do so. The total public participation time is not to exceed 30 minutes. We can have some leeway with that because this is not as straightforward as people being here in the meeting. Again, speakers may offer objective criticism of school operations and programs that concern them, but in the public session, we will not hear personnel complaints of school personnel or against any person connected with the district. So with that, I don't know if we have anyone who has called in.
No, I would ask that we reserve that if somebody does call in, we can reach back.
So do you have a way to notify us if someone does call in?
Yeah, it'll ring on my.
Okay. So is everybody good with that? If we do get a call, we'll revert back to the public participation part of that. Same policy in place. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So moving on to superintendent and committee reports, communication, curriculum, and technology.
So we did not have a full-blown meeting with all the things going on related in all these areas. We did not dive into that a whole lot. We did talk briefly about one of the communication vehicles we're talking about using over the summer, creating over the summer, sort of a back-to-school FAQ type guide that we would send home with families. It covers a lot of information about where they can find certain things, and one of the things that we talked about, based on what we've kind of learned in the last couple of months, is adding sections to that that would cover like FAQs related to remote learning in case we have to go back to that scenario for any reason coming up. So things that give, a lot of the FAQs that the staff has dealt with over the last 2 months, capturing that information and also including a section in that guide for that in case we ever have to go back to that situation. But looking forward this summer to working on some of these projects.
Yeah, and just to comment on it, and again, I know we didn't specifically have communication, but I think just as a whole, communication I think is going to be very important on a go-forward basis, especially with the uncertainty that surrounds next year. I know, since negotiations, policy, and personnel is next, I'll kind of speak to that. We did talk some personnel items, and we also talked with Matt. I mean, I think there was an open question of what next year looks like. Obviously, we have staffing concerns and things like that, and I know Carrie and Matt have shared with us. There's several options that are being tossed around, whether that be completely virtual in the fall, whether it be some type of a blended model where kids come maybe a couple days and then the next set of kids come the next 2 days, et cetera. But I think one thing that kind of stuck out for us and it just shows you, some of the difficulties districts are going to deal with, specifically talking about transportation and the number of kids that have been tossed around as being allowed to be on a bus, which is like 14. So we have buses that hold 84 kids, if I'm not mistaken, that are packed in the morning. And if we were to replicate a route by only getting 14 kids at a time, it would take us 3.5 hours to run that bus route. Obviously, that's not a situation that's conducive, not only to getting the kids here on time, but cost-wise, the cost would be through the roof. So I think communication is going to be key as we learn more from the governor, from ODE, et cetera, on what next year is going to look like. I think if you were to do some blended model, but if transportation becomes an issue, and that was only K through 8, not counting high school, transportation could be a big issue for a district this size in a rural setting. Whereas if you're in a city district, Matt gave the example of Reading, they have one school bus. Well, the kids could walk to school, but that's not feasible in our district. So if that were to become, the edict that comes from the governor's office and ODE, obviously we'd have trouble complying with that, and in that situation it would make more sense for us to be a virtual only model until such time we could bring more kids on campus at the same time. So again, I think it's going to be important that we communicate, at least to the best of our ability as we know things, and preparing parents for next year. Because again, if we move to a 100% virtual, that's going to be a struggle for some parents who may be going back to work, who may need to find childcare, et cetera. On the flip side, we as a district would go broke by running bus routes with 14 kids at a time. So as we learn, I think it's good to try to get that out and communicate with parents, and at least a steady drumbeat so that they know that we're keeping an eye on things. And again, we will let them know as soon as we know what next year looks like. So. With regard to negotiations, policy, and personnel, we did talk personnel. Kind of alluded to it earlier. I think there's a couple ways you could approach the situation we're in, and I don't want to steal too much from finance as well. But from a personnel standpoint, each of these positions is a name and a face within the district. So you could look at the numbers and say we're going to take a hatchet to the budget and start making cuts. I think in the situation we're in, I wouldn't recommend that. I think we should take a more measured approach because there's so many unknowns. I don't want to rush to automatically cutting personnel. I think we've worked hard to build a high quality staff. I think the results that we produce show that. So I want the staff to know, at least from a board perspective, that we support our staff. And right now, at least from my perspective, and maybe Kathleen could chime in, but I don't feel like it's time to take the hatchet out and start trying to burn down what we've built over the last, call it, 4 or 5 years, which is a high quality staff who are producing great results. If you look at the class and in my comments earlier about the breadth of experiences and pathways that these kids are going to be going on. So there's no doubt that we're going to maybe face some tough decisions down the road, but I think right now with all the unknowns, I think we take a pragmatic approach, go into next year kind of as planned. If there are opportunities where either personnel retire or move on, I mean, we can make a decision at that time whether or not to replace them, but I don't think it's time to take the hatchet out. So I just wanted to bring that up because I don't want staff to think that, the board is, because we're looking at these numbers, is automatically going to start looking for positions to cut, and that's not the position that at least I feel we should take. And so that's kind of, we discussed that a little bit, and maybe philosophically the strategy in personnel. Obviously the rest of it, we'll talk about some of the personnel moves later in the meeting, but just wanted to make sure I made that point. Any questions on personnel or? All right. Building, grounds, and transportation.
Yeah, we did have an opportunity to meet a couple occasions. I think kind of alluding to what you said about the busing, that was one of our topics, was actually transportation. And we would agree with you that that would be a detriment to our district to have to try to take our largest route, which is, I think, 59 students. And like you said, there'd probably be 5 trips to do that legally. One of the other things to consider is that we have a grant, and Carrie alluded to it earlier. I think she said 36,000, maybe closer to 37, I think, which is roughly a third of a bus. And in the big picture, as far as transportation, we've made a really big effort to kind of get our fleet in a good shape and continue to cycle our buses rather than get into a position where we're having to replace transmissions at a cost of 20 grand. And when we have buses that have 400,000 miles on them, that's 400,000 miles of stop and go. So it's very difficult. It's hard on those buses. So I guess during our conversation, we thought, if you don't take the 37,000, you lose it. So I think being proactive, and I know the financial situation is we don't know what's going to happen, but we don't want to leave $37,000 on the table when we know busing's never actually going to go away. So I guess kind of our recommendation, the buildings and ground, I think Mike would agree, is that we take advantage of that money and move forward with purchasing another bus. Also had an opportunity to head over to the elementary with some grant money that we secured from the Board of Workers' Compensation in the amount of $47,000. We were able to pull up the carpet. This is our second phase of pulling up carpet in the elementary building and put down the, I guess I'd call it an epoxy surface. It's very easy to clean. It's sanitary. It's colorful. Oh, there's a 10-year warranty. Thanks, Matt. Also, no touch warranty for 10 years. We also were able to do a little bit different sheen this time, so it's not quite so rough. So it's a little bit easier to clean. It's not hard to clean, but it has a little bit of a rough surface, which makes the mops kind of stick to it. So we adjusted that a little bit at no additional cost. So looks great. We would hope in the future we can secure some more grant money and continue to pull up carpet and put down the fancy new floor. Also, a follow-up on the drainage issue out at the Younger, I guess it's the playground closer to Lebanon Road. We were having issues with water backing up, had several complaints. So I made a point of going over there and keeping the drain clean, and we've had several large rainstorms. And just with simply keeping the drain clear of obstacles, and most of what was happening is that mulch was washing over. The drain seems to be doing a really good job, so we made a decision we're going to put some type of gravel in there, maybe a pea gravel, something that kids aren't tempted to pick up and throw. And I think that'll really solve a lot of those issues. If not, then we'll look at it again. But even as of today, it was draining freely. So, good news there. Let's see. We had an opportunity. We didn't actually go over and look at the new equipment, but again, Cindy Stinger has worked really hard to secure a lot of exercise equipment, and maybe Matt, you'd like to speak up on that, but we do have additional equipment out there now near the YMCA that's very nice.
Absolutely, yeah. She's done a great job doing the Health First grants, and all of that, including installation, has been covered by grant money. So none of our workers were used. It was all brought in outside the district, but all free of charge. The purpose behind that area, Cindy's vision, is to create an outdoor exercise area to where parents can maybe bring their children up to maybe a peewee football practice or a soccer practice or a baseball practice, and then they can actually go and work out themselves. She also has made sure that the items in there are eligible to be used by students with disabilities or adults with disabilities or senior citizen adults as well. So it's going to be a community-based area, also obviously being used by the school as a benefit. But she's got a great vision for that area, and right now it's not cost the school district any money whatsoever.
Excellent. And then I'd also invite you, while you're out there looking at the new equipment, to take a quick peek at the greenhouse. I think we're at the stage now where we really need the students to come back and start their design portion of the greenhouse, which would include like where to put the lights, where to set the tables, what they're going to plant. Maybe they'll be involved too with how we're going to use our water to irrigate it. And it's a really exciting time. I would really invite anyone who's interested to come on up and take a look at it. We're moving in the right direction on that project for sure. And I think the last thing I'd like to mention is that we had an opportunity to tour Jim Brady's new classroom. He'll be in the Project Lead the Way. It's something that's been offered to us, or it's being funded by Great Oaks at a cost of $68,000, which would include 25 computers, all free equipment, laser-based. I think you said, didn't you say we'd have some 3D laser printers in there as well?
Yeah, we're actually, just to clarify, that the $68,000 is the cost of the program, but of course it's not costing us anything. Like you said,
Correct.
It's being financed by Great Oaks. But we're going to have a laser engraver in there. We're going to have a banner maker. We're going to have multiple robotics stationed. The system's called VEX, which is actually the same type of robotics we use for our robotics team. So there'll be some integration there as well. So yeah, they called it. It's going to be their crown jewel of the PTLW, the Project Lead the Way program in Southwest Ohio, because of the amount of space that room gives them.
And just another note, we at a minimal expense, we were able to paint the room, remove the carpeting, paint the floor, and it's clean and it's a fresh environment that we really haven't used much in the past. So I invite you to take a look at that as well. I think that's all I have. Any questions? Or do you want to add anything, Mike?
No, I think you hit it great.
I would just add one comment, because I know we've debated this, bus mechanic position before, and I think you can see the results of not having a bus mechanic for a month. It cost us $80,000. A lot of that due to towing of buses back and forth for repairs. So I think that's a good indication of the value that position brings to the district, where we're able to do repairs on site. So I just wanted to throw that out, because I know we've had that debate before, and so I think that position more than pays for itself. So just wanted to.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. And everything I've heard, as far as that position goes, the guy is outstanding. One of his first things that he did was went around and introduced himself to the entire staff. He's made himself available. Off hours, extra hours, whatever was needed to get the job done. So it was a great hire. I don't see anything negative that came out of that hire. That's for sure, Jeremy.
No, I'd like to note, just since we're speaking about Corey, he is a fantastic addition, not only to the bus garage, but to the district. Never wants to sit, always looking for work to do. We are ahead of schedule on the PM, the maintenance of the buses. We're the only school district in this area that have had both of our yearly inspections completed already at this point in the year, so we're ahead of the game. He always wants to work, just hardworking guy. Great hire by Stephen. I commend him for bringing him on. And he is a resident with 4 students that'll come through the district as well.
All right. Any other questions for building and grounds and transportation? All right, turn it over to finance.
All right. So I mentioned earlier we had a finance committee meeting, but the announcements for some of those cuts, we knew they were coming, but didn't have the numbers. So some of the things that we went over, I guess you would say were premature just from the timing. But I'm going to run through a few things. The first thing, we've been talking, I believe, the last 2 virtual board meetings about the bond refinance. Just give a super quick update on that. We have all the paperwork. We, passed the motion as a board. But basically right now, I would just say we're kind of in pause mode because, and Carrie, feel free to, if I don't say this perfectly, basically right now there's not really an advantage based on all of the market conditions for us to refinance. But the motion is open that if at any point it changes and we can jump back in, everything's set to do so. So at Fifth Third, they're just monitoring that for us, and if anything changes, obviously we'll jump back in and in that window that we've already approved. So that good stuff. Okay. So then we did talk a little bit about the 5-year plan, but obviously that has changed drastically. I would just echo the comments, and Carrie always does a great job. I feel like when I get ready to do the finance subcommittee updates, I just almost feel like I'm repeating everything that Carrie already said. But the 5-year plan is just a work in progress. Those numbers, clearly we've got a lot of questions about what the changes to wine is going to make and what that's really going to mean to us. But I think we've got at least the best stab that we can at this point. And just on a personal basis, I'm very disheartened. It just seems like the second that they're making cuts, it has to come from education. I'm just very disheartened that that's the first place we feel we need to cut is education. But that's more just on a process versus the actual financials. So we did talk through the spring supplementals. That issue is on the board later. The language and so on is on later for vote. I think you guys know where we stand on that, and then that does not. So again, there's verbiage around that, but the stands for spring and fall are two different things. So we're obviously still waiting to see what's going to happen in the fall. So, and then I had a note to mention the mixed busing, but I think we've all kind of hit that. I would just say from a finance perspective, just the concept not only of mixed busing but also of mixed learning is going to create very, very challenging times for all aspects, not just financial. But I think we've already talked about that, so I'll punt that one. I don't know, Mike. Anything else you want to add? You're good.
Nope.
Okay. Anything else for finance?
I've got a statement, or not, it's not even a statement, it's more of a question for you, Matt. So I know in email, we get a ton of stuff from OSBA and various organizations, and with what Mike just said, it made me think of it. Very disappointed that the state's cutting funding. I know we get a lot of emails where they ask for the districts to provide them with information, to fill out surveys, to do whatever. Number one, what are you guys already doing? And number two, what can we do? I know as legislative liaison, I get some of those emails too,
Sure.
but I'm not sure which ones I should be reacting to.
Yep, I actually just got one, I think it was late last week, that was asking for that very input right there. The committee that DeWine has put together has kind of trickled down, we'll say, to the local level where they're asking for inputs of, mainly the first step is technology access. So they want us to turn in information, because we've done this already, of how many students need technology access that don't have it currently. If I'm projecting, there's going to be some sort of rebate through the E-rate system, and they're trying to get as much information as possible to see what number they need to give to help a certain percentage of the school districts. But yeah, we do get that regularly from OSBA or from straight from the government entities. I've also sent some information to DeWine just from a perspective, a superintendent's perspective, with some concerns that I have going into not only finishing this year but next year. That would be my first avenue as far as suggestions for information. is to direct his, direct your emails to his office specifically. You get on his governor website and it gives you an option to drop down and pick what subject matter you're going to tell him about. And the first one I picked was education. And that just probably filters it to somebody before it ever would, even if it ever gets to him. But that would be my first step and suggestion.
Right, and I assume that every time anybody asks us for stuff, we're sending them data so we can, I know we get tons of these emails, so I just want to make sure anytime they are asking for feedback from a district, we're heard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't gotten, I would, and I'm not trying to counter you. I haven't received a ton to where like it's overwhelming by any
Right.
means. No, I'm just,
To me, it is because it's not my full-time job.
yeah, it's fair enough.
So,
Yeah. The ITC that we work with, which is SWOCA, has taken on some of that responsibility. So because they process DAZZLE for us, basically our student information system, they're able to fulfill requests back to the state before they ever even land on our table. We're told about them, but the president of SWOCA will send us, hey, we sent this information on your behalf, and it had to do with this and this and this as requested
Okay.
by the state. But yeah, I think at this point they've been understanding that we're under a lot of pressures and time consuming, and they've only asked for things that they think are relevant to, I hope, solving funding concerns.
Well, you may not be seeing all the emails I'm seeing from the legislative liaison piece. You may not be copied on those. 'Cause
No,
they
we
ask
got
us
the-
questions about that too. It's like, hey, send an email. Here's a list of your legislative people up at the State House. Start sending emails to them.
Yeah, I've not received any email like that, but I do have the one from OSBA that you're referencing that they asked for, like the additional costs that we've incurred, with the closure. And we've been 5-year forecasting literally all last week. So I still have that email in my inbox that now that that's through, I can go into more of a cost analysis beyond what's on our 5-year forecast page I gave you. So yes, I will be reporting that
So
to the
I'm
state.
kind of wondering with the emails that I get, Jeremy, I should maybe talk with you every week or so if I get these things to see if we think we should be responding to some of them. Only because up until this point, a lot of it has been mostly informational, but lately it's been a lot of, the State House is working on a lot of bills, and they're asking for feedback, and OSBA is asking for us to support them in whatever positions, and I know you don't always get copied on those.
Sure, and it sounds like that does sound like a different avenue than what we're being requested.
Right.
We're being
Agreed.
requested data for the purpose of funding, where you're being requested as a board member and the
Right.
liaison, almost a voice to be returned back
Exactly.
to the state.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are
So
a little bit different.
Would you be Jeremy, you're the first person I probably need to be talking to
I
about what we
mean,
want.
I would just say we can work that into policy personnel and talk through those
Okay.
emails, and then work with the balance of the board. If there's statements that need to be put together, or letters written, or whatever
Right.
the case may be.
Up until now,
'Cause
it's
obviously-
mostly been just informational, but it's
Yeah.
like lately with all the stuff they're trying to shoot through, it's like,
Yeah.
One quick follow-up. You mentioned something about the internet access and all that. When that survey was initially taken or given by the teachers, I think there was some definitions of what's accessible internet, because I think talking to a lot of people that if they had internet access on their phone, they answered yes to that.
Yep.
And then quickly found out that, whoa, that's not going to work, but I've already said yes. So I think our number is technically inflated versus what it realistically is.
We actually took that into account. We felt the same way. Once we reflected on the numbers, we felt our number was too low. So I agree with you. I think some people answered yes for accessibility when it was phone only, even though we had a choice of phone only. But I would agree. Our number, what I'll be able to share with the state is something that we can create without using that data. Like we
Okay.
can update that data. We're not collecting it from old information. They want current and beyond.
Because I think if you redid that survey, most parents would change their answers. Because even around here, Frontier, do you have reliable internet? I think we'd have to answer no for a
Correct.
lot. We just would. If you have
Correct.
3 students, you cannot be on. All the students cannot be online. So I just want to make sure that takes into account.
Absolutely.
If that does affect funding for us.
Yep. I would agree 100%, and myself included. I'm a Frontier customer. I live in an area where it's only DSL, and I come to the office anyway, but it's a mandate for me because I can't do any kind of video chat. There's no chance I'm video chatting from home. I can maybe use my hotspot some, so I agree. We probably can both clarify, and David and I have already taken that information and included what we consider a percentage of, I said, we'll say misrepresentation then. Yep.
Which is actually a good point, because if we're talking about where we can provide feedback from a legislative standpoint, obviously an underserved area when it comes to internet, reliable internet, is probably something we ought to look for an opportunity to provide feedback on. Yeah, so I agree. I mean, it's nice that a lot of companies extended hotspots for additional data, but you know, having been a former Frontier customer, even though it was the high speed, it was still not reliable. And then trying to run things, if you have multiple students off a phone, is a non-starter. So that if there's an impact we can make, maybe we should sit down and look and see how we could generate some advocacy with regard to expanded internet service.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on your point of the 3 levels of learning for next year, remote learning, what we're calling a blended learning, or they've called it a staggered learning, and then a traditional. Our number one thing on remote learning, very first problem we have to solve in essence, is accessibility. We have students that are only receiving paper copies, and when it's rote memorization that's being requested, meaning information you've already learned that can just be regurgitated back, that's one thing. But if we were to start with this, that's new information. You know, if I'm doing this in August and September, I have to teach that information, and we feel that's going to be very difficult for students if they have no internet access. And it's going to be a difference in adequacy of that internet as well.
It goes for the teachers too. I know we have teachers that
Absolutely.
fortunately live in a district and they're, by the same standard, have unreliable internet when they're trying to hold Zoom meetings or Hangouts or whatever.
Yeah, we've talked to that very thing, that, you know, it's in essence 2 levels. So again, my projection, and it's no more than a projection, but it's an educated guess, that the information they're getting is so that we'll get some sort of, you know, Verizon hotspots or Kajits or whatever program / product they give us. Some of that will have to be useful for our staff, because of that very thing, is that we have staff members just like myself. I have a couple staff members that live right around the corner from me, and we text back and forth little funny things about, hey, you know, can I come join your internet because mine's broke? And then they'll send me something back. Actually, can I drive over your house? Or I've got teachers that are willing to drive to, you know, public entities where there's free Wi-Fi just to be able to use that. So I agree. It's not just students, it's staff as well.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right, moving on to superintendent's recommendation, curriculum and school business.
All right, for 5A, we'd like to approve the changing of the June board meeting to the 29th. It was previously approved for the 22nd, and that's due to, we get our second June foundation payment on the 19th, so to be able to close out the year and have the documents uploaded to board docs for you guys to look at adequately before the board meeting, if we could push it to the 29th, that would be greatly appreciated.
Does that present a problem for anybody? I'm good on the 29th. Okay. All right. So do we need a motion for that then, I guess?
Yes.
So I would motion to change the June board meeting from June 22nd to June 29th. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Mrs. Norman?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Goodall?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll step back in under other school business. Item 2, approve graduating class of 2020 pending on local and state graduation requirements, as the examples were given, which were list of graduates.
All right, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Norman?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Goodall?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Under item 1, under policy updates, so just to clarify, these are already policies that have done first reads, and we're asking for final approval under just item 1, please.
All right, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Goodall?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Mrs. Norman?
Yes.
Under item 2, this is not normally ask for approval of new policy, but because it is directly related to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, we feel we need to discuss and vote on approval this board meeting because it does relate to FMLA status moving forward. So those items have been sent to you, as well as Carrie, have they also been sent in as public documents?
Yes.
So they've been made public since the live link has went out for the board agenda. Can we start with GBRA? So that should be the first one. Basically, these go as a policy, and then after the policy, the -R means the regulation. So it's policy, regulation, policy, regulation. So the policy on GBRA does ask for the board to choose one of the two items under an employee who takes expanded family medical leave, or with the exception of key employees. So as I shared in the email, I was not certain why that differentiation was made, so we sent that to our legal counsel, and our legal counsel has suggested, of course it's the board's choosing, but the legal counsel has suggested the second option, and the reason being is it gives you more expandability. He said the likelihood that you will use that expandability or the necessity of that expandability is almost nil, but it is there if you ever were to need it. That would be GBRA under just not -R. So we need to choose either an employee in the first paragraph or with an exception of key employees, and then the rest of the paragraph.
So we need to select GBRA or GBRA-R.
No, actually, we'll
So
be
it's the
voting
same,
on
right.
each of the four, but you will need to make a choice as a board between the bracketed items
Right.
that were listed, correct?
Mr. Baker, could you reiterate, you said the legal counsel advised which one?
The legal counsel advised the double paragraph after the word "or," and he said the reason that you would want to put that in place is it gives you more flexibility. It gives you more. He said again, the need for it, meaning, are we ever going to have to remove a person's position due to the coronavirus returning? Probably not, but it's there if you need it.
Do you mind reading the first and the second option?
Sure, no problem. An employee who takes expanded Family and Medical Leave Act will be able to return to the same position or a position with equivalent status, pay, benefits, and other employment terms. An employee has no greater right to reinstatement or to other benefits and conditions of employment than if the employee had been continuously employed during the FFCRA, which stands for Family First Coronavirus Response Act, expanded FMLA leave period. So if they, I'll do my own paraphrasing here. If you leave because you're concerned about it, we'll give you a spot back. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the exact same spot, but we have to reinstate the same pay, benefits, schedule,
Right.
so on and so forth. The second item, meaning this would be choice 2, it says, with the exception of certain key employees, an employee who takes FFCRA expanded FMLA leave will be able to return to the same position or a position with equivalent status, pay, benefits, or other employment terms. An employee has no greater right to reinstatement or to other benefits and conditions of employment than if the employee had been continuously employed during the FFCRA expanded FMLA leave period. The district exempts key employees if returning them to the same or similar position will cause substantial and grievous economic injury to the district's operations. Key employees will be given written notice of his or her status as a key employee at the time FFCRA expanded FMLA leave is requested.
So the only differentiation is the key employee differentiation.
Correct.
The second part.
That's it. Everything else
So-
is verbatim.
And I guess my question is, what's the interpretation of a key employee? I'm trying to understand why the differentiate
Yeah,
language.
a key employee is, and I had the same question, a key employee was listed as somebody that is in an administrator role or makes, this is the words of our lawyer, over $100,000 a year.
So essentially, if I understand that correctly, right, then the key employee would be exempted from the return to work under the same condition of employment if the financial impact is detrimental to the district.
That is correct. So I'll use an example that I'm making up. This is not from our legal counsel. So if Matt Baker, the staff support supervisor, took an FFCRA expanded FMLA, and I was gone for X amount of time, and then by coming back, I would increase the cost to the district so much that we would be in financial ruin. I can come back, but not necessarily in that same position. The board would have the exemptability, if you will, to stay with the clause of having to give me the exact same pay and the exact same benefits.
And so I'm just thinking how this would impact the collective bargaining agreement. My guess is that there's no applicability because it's not written into the CBA.
Right.
So it would only affect not employees not covered by that CBA deemed to be a key employee. That's the way I understood it when I read through it. Is that
I would feel that's accurate, yes.
The key employee is a broad definition, or is that something that's laid out? I know you said over 100,000, but
That's only how our lawyer described it. I think he was being facetious, meaning administrator or non-bargaining unit member.
right.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have other non-bargaining member units that are key employees to what we do. Maybe not at a high salary,
I
but
think
does that
that-
include them in there?
I do not feel that's, I think he was being specific enough to say you're talking about big money people. You're talking about high salary, high administrators. So if you were to compare that to maybe a classified position that's not covered under bargaining, that would not allow us to exempt them from that.
So are
because
you saying the SLT team basically?
I would define that as the SLT, myself, and Carrie.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. Yep. And we, again, you have as a board every right to choose either one, but I figured you probably had the similar questions that I did, and that is what's the difference between the two, and what does the current term key employee mean?
Yeah, that's what I was trying. I mean, again, I don't think it impacts the bargaining unit because there's no language in that contract. So it only affect potentially classifieds and administrators.
Right.
And I know there's separate language in the ORC with respect to classified. So then I was like, well, that really impacts administrators in the district.
Correct.
potentially.
And I would just like it noted that no member of the Board of Education or the administration is trying to say that people are not key employees.
well-
It's just by definition.
Right. It's definition of the. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
Okay.
So does anybody have any strong feelings either way?
I would just say this. The thing that I don't like about that, and not saying that I don't like it more from the perspective of when you say, I like the fact that it gives us more flexibility, but when you say that person returning has to have a what was the word? Serious financial,
Grievous,
like
yeah.
grievous. I mean,
Correct. That would be
That's-
hard to define.
that would
Yeah.
be really hard. I really don't like the language.
Yeah.
Not that I would always defer to Kathleen as my language guru, but that language to me, I mean, first you have what is key employee, then you have the slippery language of
Right.
grievous. I don't know. I just
and add to that substantial and
Well,
grievous.
And
Right.
so I think I'm of the same opinion because I think as you start to differentiate all these different layers, that's more administrative work that we have to do as a district rather than if you go with option one, it's pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, option one would be what I would, and Carrie can differ if she feels this way. I would say it's similar to what we already have, meaning there isn't a differentiation in our, we'll call it regular FMLA.
Because at the end of the day, if an employee coming back gets the position, but the district's in grievous financial conditions, then likely there's going to be cuts that could be that employee or other employees, according to the CBA,
Through a-
whatever the
through
case
a
may be.
RIF,
Right.
correct.
So, I mean, I would be of the opinion to go with number one, just because I don't want to manage the administrative part of defining key employees, defining what is a grievous financial risk to the district, et cetera. I mean,
Yeah, I have a comment. Judy Sternshire, the CMEA president, couldn't be here tonight, and she's listening in on the live stream. And
Yep.
I told her that she could contact me if she has comments, and she would just again agree that a key employee would need to be defined somewhere
Right.
if we're going to go that path.
so is there any objection to option number one? All right, so that's for GBRA.
That is correct.
So do we want to do these individual motions? I guess we'd have to, right? Or
I don't think so. I think you can just pick which ones you want and then vote all together.
Make the motion with the first.
okay. So then if so we're on option 1 for that. Let's go through the rest of them, then we'll figure out how we bring this
Okay.
back for a vote.
So under GBRA-R, this is a 2-stage approach. Stage 1 is on page 1. You basically have to decide as a Board of Education if we are going to allow an FFCR expanded FMLA to be intermittent. Intermittent is something that we currently have in our FMLA
Yes.
language, but this is separate FFCRA expanded FMLA. So you would have to choose yes or no. If you choose yes, then you would be asked to pick item 1 or item 2 as listed on the page 2 of 4.
And so can you read those
Sure.
2 options?
Absolutely. Option number 1, so this again would be if the Board of Education chooses to yes, allow intermittent FFCRA expanded FMLA. Choice number 1, an eligible employee may take FFCRA expanded FMLA leave intermittently while the employee's child's school or place of care is closed or child care provider is unable due to a COVID-19 related reason. That's item number 1.
Yep.
Item number 2, only an eligible employee who is teleworking may take FFCRA expanded FMLA and medical leave intermittently while the employee's child's school or place of care is closed or child care provider is unavailable due to the COVID-19 related reason.
So we don't,
So I have my description of that if you want to hear. Basically, we have what we would consider teleworking right now, and that is our teachers, some of our administrators, they're teleworking. So I see it as 2 levels. Basically, level 1 says as soon as some child goes, the daycare shuts down, the child care provider maybe gets COVID or whatever the case is, immediately this can kick in. The other one is they have to be already 1 level away from work, which would be teleworking. So if I can throw my 2 cents in, I think you should pick one, but that's just me.
I would just like to ask. So I probably read this 5 times today, and I just kept
did I.
reading
That's
it
why
and
I'm
trying to
like,
think, what on earth are we getting to? Because the issue that I'm stuck on, and again, I keep looking at Kathleen as the word person, but this employee's child's school, but we as a board are making policy for a school. So an employee's child's school is us, and
Right.
in the event that the school closes, the employee's school is closed. It's almost like we've created this infinite loop of wording here. If I understand it correctly, the point is the only time that this really would apply, because an employee of the school, if the school is closed, the employee is off work as well.
Right.
The only time that this would apply would be in the, I guess, maybe trying to think of an example, like you thought of an example would be if maybe a custodial position with a spouse. I mean, so we're getting to kind of the 2nd or 3rd degree.
Correct.
But
Yep.
the majority of this is anytime the school's closed, the employee's child's school is. I mean,
closed.
it's the same thing. So
I thought
just hated the wording.
I thought it said something about childcare too. So if we have a teacher that lives in the Springboro district and they close because of COVID, their kid goes to Springboro, but they work here, they can take that leave because their kid school closed or their kid's daycare. So
You're right.
it's not necessarily our school. They
Correct.
could live out of district, and if that school district, Mason closed, and they live in a Mason district, and they have to stay home with their kid because Mason is closed.
Right. And the second option is saying that person has to already be removed from the district and teleworking 1 level away.
Right, meaning we're
Yeah.
not back
We're not back.
brick and
We're
mortar.
remote.
If we're
Yeah.
still,
Right.
right. Right.
So when I read through this, I came out with the yes in option one. I just want to make sure we had the discussion. And again, if there's anybody that feels strongly about yes option two or no and something else, but I came out kind of in the same place you did, but I wanted to have the discussion because like Mike, I probably read this 10 times and I was trying to figure out what the hell they were trying to say. So, but it seemed like this was a lot simpler if you go with yes in option one. That was
It would be more verbose, correct? You'd
Right.
have a wider breadth, as you
Right.
said. Yeah.
So is there any objection to yes and option one on GBRA-R? Okay. Moving on to the next one.
Okay. So under GBRAA, there is no board action required.
Yep.
GBRAA-R would have the same exact wording. It's actually verbatim, like there is no change. It was just intermittent leave option, which is a yes. If you choose yes, you have to pick the same options of number one, which is caring for his or her child if the school or place the child care of the child has been closed or the child care provider of such child is unavailable due to COVID-19 precautions. So all it does is it references you back to the same exact wording that's in the first one.
Right, so GBRAA would be approved as is, correct?
GBRA, correct, would
Right.
be approved as is. Yep.
And GBRAA-R would be a yes option one.
If you're matching
If
the
you
other
match
one,
the
correct.
GBRA-R.
That is correct. So
Everybody
I'm
on the same page now.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks being on the school board's fun. All right, so good. I have to admit I struggled a bit with these
Yeah.
today as I was reading through, and it was like reading a foreign language. But so if I understand here, so what we have is a motion to approve GBRA option one, GBRA-R yes option one, GBRA as written, GBRAA-R yes option one.
That is correct.
Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Any questions? All right, seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Goodall,
Yes.
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery.
Yes.
All right.
Under item C, resolutions, approve the resolution for the continued operation of schools during the pendency of Executive Order 2020-01D, the Ohio Department of Health Director's order regarding the closure of all District K-12 schools in the state of Ohio.
All right, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Mr. Goodall.
Yes.
Approving resolution under item 2 to maintain employment and compensation of employees, contracted service providers, and consultants for the remainder of the fiscal year 2020 to support continued operations. Hold on, go ahead.
That's the one that has the supplementals in it, or was it the first one that did?
The
think the
second
f-
one.
I don't remember which one it was. But one of them was to continue to pay our employees, even though Ohio Revised Code says that. The auditor did a webinar, and he would like to have a board resolution that says we can continue to pay our employees according to ORC. And then the other one has the spring supplementals, the year-long supplementals, and the, I guess some of the winter ones. To pay those 100%. So that's what we're voting on with these two resolutions.
Right, and so I guess I would just add to that, I guess my perspective on it is that I did see a lot of the spring supplemental coaches, et cetera, continue to prepare for a season that never came to fruition. So it's kind of, in my opinion, while the season didn't happen, you had coaches and advisors, et cetera, that were putting in time to prepare for that potential reopening. And so, my opinion would be that we compensate those people for that work. Because I think it's a slippery slope if you try to go back and say, well, Kathleen put in 50%, but then Mike put in 85%. I think the fair thing to do is just go ahead and close it out. And again, as we move to the fall, I think it's going to be a different beast depending on what happens. But at least we will have time to prepare for that, and those folks will. Sorry for throwing my eraser at you, Kathleen. And we'll have time to prepare for whatever that compensation program looks like.
Yes,
So,
and Mr. Baker and I met with Mrs. Sternshire, the CMEA president, who's outgoing, and Mr. Holland, who's going to be the new CMEA president, and they suggested instead of having to do a resolution like this for the fall sports contracts, actually all fall supplementals, and I suggested putting in all of them, we're adding additional language to the contract itself that the employee gets that says if for any reason your activity is canceled either before the season starts or during the season, the board can vote to prorate it and or not pay them at all. So for all supplementals going forward, we will just have that language in their actual contract that they get. And I will send something out too that says, hey, make sure you read that. We changed it. So but make sure you read it before you sign it so you completely understand that.
But
So
we're
that's
not talking about that here, though, right? That's coming
No.
soon.
so we're not
later.
voting on
We-
that.
yeah,
I
you
mean,
don't
I
have
think
to
we can
vote
ta-
on that.
we
We're
can
just
talk
changing
about
that
it.
language.
Right,
Right.
gotcha.
It's in
Yeah.
public session, which I would support that.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't have to vote on it tonight, but
Okay.
I think it might, again, this is, I think, what we as a board need to think about over the next few months as we move toward these type of decisions. I think it would be good for us to provide that discussion in open session so that they have some guidance
Right.
as we look at either contract changes, et cetera. Again, so we can be fair to the employees and make sure that we're alerting them beforehand what the intended action of the administration of the board is.
Yeah.
So does anybody have any issues with the payout of the spring supplementals as Carrie has discussed?
Can you clarify the spring supplementals? Because I know we talked about this in the finance committee.
Yes.
Some of that includes people that go to dance to
Mhm.
monitor the.
Yes.
Are we came to the conclusion that we are going to pay them.
We are, yes, because we had some people had traded, like, hey, I can't make homecoming. Will you take homecoming for me, and I'll take prom for you? We don't know who, all did that, and so
Okay.
yes, we're just taking everything that was on the books for this year, already budgeted, and paying that out since it was a cancellation unforeseen, out of their control.
And then next year with the CMEA starts a whole new language.
Correct.
That's where, okay.
Yes. Yep. So every single supplemental will have that language in it. Yep.
All right. So you have the superintendent's recommendation under C2 on the floor. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Mr. Goodall,
Yes.
Mr. Gorman.
Yes.
Again, working with Mrs. Sternshire and Mr. Holland, we are asking for the approval of resolution to waive the fourth quarter attendance bonus for non-teaching staff for the 2019-2020 school year.
Yeah, so this is for the non-teaching staff. Since they don't fall under the CBA, they just fall under board policy. Typically, whatever we do with the teaching staff, we do to the non-teaching staff. So our lawyer suggested we do a resolution for them, and then you'll see an MOU later to do for the teaching staff.
All right. You have a resolution under C3. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions?
Quick question.
Yep.
Or comment.
Mhm.
I thought that the non-teaching staff was set up on a yearly and not quarterly. Are we just going to divide the yearly into quarterly for them?
So they get paid out yearly, but they get a stipend for each quarter. So the teaching staff gets paid out twice. They get paid out per semester. Whereas
I thought we changed that, and I think maybe Jeremy and I even talked about where, as an incentive, well, I guess I think we are on a full year for hourly, aren't we? They have to reach a certain amount of days within the year, and the teachers were at our last negotiation went to quarterly.
No, I think whatever the CBA represents should be the same for classified staff.
it is, yeah. So we, once Terry has all the attendance posted, I pull the report and see who has made each one, and so then we take all 4 quarters together, and then she makes one payment to them at the end, as opposed to there's 2 payments for the certified staff. But yeah,
Right.
their attendance bonus is based on quarterly absences.
Right. Any other questions? All right, we already have the motion on the table. We were at questions, so any additional questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Norman?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Goodall?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Moving on to items 1 and 2 under the agreement. These are boilerplate every year. We continue to have to do a signed agreement between the Clinton Massachusetts Local Board of Education and the Southern Ohio Educational Service Center, their governing board, and Region 14 for our support services. So this is just that time of the year that we would ask to do that. There would be no changes compared to any other services that we've done in the past. So I'd ask for agreements 1 and 2 to be approved.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Goodall?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Mrs. Norman?
Yes.
All right, the next item on the agenda is to enter executive session to consider the appointment, employment, discipline, dismissal, promotion, or compensation of a public employee or official. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Goodall?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Mrs. Norman?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Let the record show we entered executive session at 9:08, and we will return when we're done. Do we need to test him? Okay. We're waiting for Mike to get back.
Yeah.
For those of you listening, we're waiting for Mike Gorman to come back in the room, and then we'll resume.
Oh, I did shut it. You're right. Sorry.
All right. I would now entertain a motion to return to regular session.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All right. Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Mr. Goodall.
Yes.
Return to regular session at 11:54. All right. Under number 7, superintendent's recommendations.
Under item 1, for approve resignations, we'll accept and ask for the approval of resignation of Kelly Wright, bus driver.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Mr. Goodall,
Yes.
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
As discussed in executive session, we would go back to approve employment. So under 1, approve the hiring of Andrew Avery, teacher for the 2021 school year.
All right. You've heard the superintendent's recommendation under C1. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery,
Abstain.
Mr. Goodall,
Yes.
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb.
Yes.
Item 2, approve the hiring of Laura Geddert, intervention specialist at the elementary.
All right. You've heard the superintendent's recommendation under C2. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Mr. Goodall,
Yes.
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman.
Yes.
Under item 3, approve the hiring of John Lindeman.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation under C3. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Goodall,
Yes.
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Approving number 4, the hiring of speech therapist Jessica Crawford.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation under C4. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Mr. Goodall.
Yes.
Lastly, number 5, approve the hiring of Carrie Wilkinson, intervention specialist.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation under C5. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Mr. Goodall,
Yes.
Mr. Gorman.
Yes.
Under item D, I'm asking for approval for all supplementals listed in number 1.
All right. You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Mr. Goodall,
Yes.
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb.
Yes.
Under item G, I'm asking for the approval of the certified contracts for the 2021 school year.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Mr. Goodall,
Yes.
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman.
Yes.
I would ask for approval for the 2021 classified contracts under item G2.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Goodall,
Yes.
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery.
Yes.
Under item G3, I would motion to table until the next meeting. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? And I just wanted to provide some context to that motion. I think with the impending cancellation or the potential cancellation of fall sports, it is the desire to have a conversation with Mrs. Running about what an assignment might look like for the athletic director in the fall if indeed sports are canceled before we tender that contract. So Mr. Baker will take that conversation back to Mrs. Running. Again, there's some uncertainty around it, and we want to make sure that we're fair to that position as well to understand what the potential employment role might be in a situation where fall sports were canceled in the fall or canceled beyond the fall. So we have a motion on the table with a first and a second.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Mr. Goodall.
Yes.
If I could, we'll combine both 4 and 5 due to the fact that it's training by Cindy Stinger and Patty Ratliff that we do pretty continually.
All right, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation under G4 and 5. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Mr. Goodall,
Yes.
Mr. Gorman.
Yes.
I do want to note that those two ladies save us a bunch of money, from having to bring in an outside entity, and they always stay up to date on their certification, so I appreciate that, and it is a savings to the district. Number 6, as mentioned before by Ms. Burr, the approval is requested for a MOU between Clinton Massey Education Association effective August 1st through July 31st of 2022, which waives the 4th quarter attendance bonus for the 1920 school year.
All right, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation under G6. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Norman,
Yes.
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Mr. Goodall,
Yes.
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb.
Yes. All right, is there any new business to come before the board this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to the favorite of the night, which is the motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Avery,
Yes.
Mr. Goodall,
Yes.
Mr. Gorman,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mrs. Norman.
Yes.
Note that we adjourned at 12 o'clock, and note that we changed the next meeting to June 29th. Thanks.